name is Dylan Martin. I'm the Communications Director of Reform California. Thank you for joining us here today. And a huge shout out to our college Republicans who helped organize this and put it on. They're the ones that sponsored this event. So thank you to our CR. So thank you all for showing up. Being engaged in the process is major, and we cannot do this without you. We cannot take our country back without you. You guys are the grassroots army. So I will be going over our voter guide today, but first and foremost, my job is to convince you why you need to stay and fight in California. I know. How many of you have thought of potentially moving out of the state or have friends or family who have moved out of the state? I myself confess that I've thought of it. I am 27, so I've looked at the housing market and everything for the future, and it is very hard to afford anything in California. So I feel you. But first and foremost, of 3 reasons why I encourage you to stay and fight in California is the grass is not always greener on the other side. So number 1, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And for everybody that moves out of California, if you're good, common sense, conservative, you move out of California, you're going to go to the solid red state of Arizona or Georgia. That might not be working out so well for you, because for every conservative that flees this state to try and run somewhere better to a solid red state, 10 liberals come and follow you and continue voting blue and turn that state purple. So that is an issue that we have here, but you can always change your government as these places, their governments are changing, of course. So we can change our government in California as well. But one thing you can't change is the mosquitoes, the humidity, the hurricanes. So we are very fortunate in that California is a beautiful place worth fighting for. And so we can change our government, though. And I'm not just saying that, because number 2, you can change your government if we stay and fight. And I'm not just saying that, I have data. So if you look back to the gubernatorial elections, first off in 2018, when Gavin Newsom, when he first ran for governor, he got 62% of the vote. And he was running against the Republican nominee, if you may remember him, was John Cox. And John Cox ran an okay campaign, just kind of so-so. But Gavin Newsom got 62% of the vote against John Cox. Now, does anyone even remember who the nominee was in 2022 for Republicans against Gavin Newsom? 10 points to Gryffindor, if you can remember. No, not Steve Garvey. He's running for Senate right now, but good guess. No, it was Brian Dahle. Brian Dahle was the Republican nominee in 2022 for governor, and he ran a terrible campaign. Evidenced by the fact that none of you can remember him. It's okay. He ran a terrible campaign. But even running a terrible campaign, he still did better than John Cox. Newsom did worse. So from 2018, Newsom got 62% of the vote. In 2022, Newsom got 56% of the vote. So there was a decrease in his margin. Now, why that's major is because during that same time, 3 million people moved out of California, and 1.4 million of them were Republicans and independents. If all 1.4 million of those people had stayed and voted with their ballot instead of their feet, it would have been 50-50 in the 2022 gubernatorial election. Here's where it gets even crazier. If every person in the state that voted for Donald Trump in 2020 had voted for Brian Dahle in 2022, it would have been 53-47 for Brian Dahle, and we have a Republican governor right now. So that's the kind of larger abstract for statewide often. So it is possible, and we are moving in the right direction, as we saw with that margin from 2018 to 2022. But we are seeing actual wins in the data on the more local level with congressional and city council districts, et cetera, specifically Congress. So in 2020 was the first time since 1998, I was 2 years old, it was a while ago, first time since 1998 when we actually flipped congressional seats from Democrats to Republicans. What was 2020? We flipped 4 seats. Now, the Democrats were not happy that we flipped 4 seats. They were pissed off. They're like, how dare they finally start to turn things around in California? So with the 2020 census, because every 10 years we can redistrict, redraw the lines, we get reapportioned congressional members for every state. So with the 2020 census, they were going to redraw the lines for all the congressional districts. And the Democrats said, we hate that they took those 4 seats back, so we're going to redraw the lines in California. We're going to gerrymander them to be more Democrat. So we're going to take back all 4 of those seats. And we're going to redraw 2 other Republican districts to make them more Democrats so we can try and pick those off too. That'll teach those evil Republicans. Well, not only did we still win those 4 seats again in 2022, we also kept those other 2 Republican seats, and we flipped a surprise 7th seat. That was John Duarte's seat in the 13th Congressional District. So the national Republicans and even the California Republican Party have kind of written Republicans in the state off for dead. They've said, we're never going to win any of these seats. But it's because of people like you, the grassroots, that we did take back these seats and defied expectations and shocked the entire country. And California is such a major deal, especially for the congressional level, because we currently, in 2022, we won the Republican majority in the U.S. House of Representatives by only 5 seats. That was that margin in California that we were able to hang on to those seats and flip a few. So it's very important, our California races, and we are making incremental progress. So as much as I love everyone being like, California is going to be 100% Republican tomorrow, I would love that. I would love to, even just to restore balance. And that is our main mission in Reform California, is restore balance to our government. So we can at least maybe be 50-50 and reach some consensus or compromise or something instead of a super majority of Democrats that are just running away with the state. But we are making some incremental change, at least. So I do want to tell you that there is hope. It's worth fighting for. Number 3, why you need to stay and fight, is we cannot have a healthy America with a sick California. So California, for decades, everyone was proud to be from California. It was the center of culture. It was a place to start a business, start a family. It was Hollywood glamour, Americana, Marilyn Monroe, all the movies, etc. Everyone wanted to move to California. If you traveled abroad, it was, I'm from California. Now, if you travel abroad and anyone asks you where you're from, you're like, I'm from California. Yeah. It's like you're ashamed. And it's no wonder we have skyrocketing crime, skyrocketing cost of living, homeless crisis. It's terrible. And of course, Newsom's trying to sweep it under the rug and say, oh no, it's not there. Don't look at the guy behind the curtain. Don't look at any of this stuff because I want to be president, and don't look at it. He definitely wants to be president, folks. Don't let him fool you. He's hoping for that. He's probably hoping that Kamala Harris loses, too, so that he can try and be the nominee in 2028. That's a scary thought. But anyway, so we cannot have a healthy America with us in California because that stuff spreads. Again, these bad ideas in California, if you're moving out, 10 Democrats are maybe falling out with you and infecting the rest of the country with a lot of these terrible ideas, as we see Kamala Harris is a product of California. So we need to improve California. We need to fight for it. We need to build the wall, so to speak, here of keeping some of the insanity here and at bay and helping the rest of the country out. So there's a few reasons why we need to stay and fight. Now, how are we doing it in Reform California? Well, one of the ways we're doing it is by trying to make the Republican Party of California actually conservative and actually have bold ideas. For too long, we've had spineless, wimpy, even Republican politicians, and we're not. If you're not new to Reform California, we're not new to calling out both sides of the aisle if they do bad things. And we have a lot of spineless, wimpy Republicans in office too. We need to hold them accountable, and we need to hold our own Republican Party accountable too, to actually serve the people and not special interests and not their own pockets. Which I'll explain what they're doing. Some of you may have gotten voter guides from the California Republican Party. I urge you not to trust it, and I'll explain why. But we're working to try and hold them to be actually conservative, have bold ideas. Because for too long, the California Republican Party has thought the solution in California was to be more like Democrats. If we're just like them, people will want to vote for us. You know the meme where it's, point out the difference between these two pictures. They're the same picture. Kind of that. If you're not able to offer a viable alternative with bold ideas, be honest what you stand for, people aren't inspired to vote for that. They're the same thing. If you've got basically 2 Democrats running, why are you incentivized to vote for one over the other? It's the same thing. So we're working to try and push the party to actually stand on bold ideas that resonate with people. And one of the ways we're doing that is partly through our voter guide. And we're also encouraging not splitting the vote. So that's a big thing throughout our party is we cannot split the vote. Our party is very, very good at, Republicans, if anything, is hurting other Republicans, unfortunately. The Democrats are very smart. We have something called a top 2 primary in California. So during the primary election, it is an open primary system where the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party, top 2 vote getters advance to the general election. So if you have a solidly conservative Republican seat, the Democrats will run 2 Democrats, and the Republicans will run 100 Republicans. And they'll completely split the vote, and you'll wind up with those 2 Democrats getting through in this solid Republican district. And if you don't believe me, it does happen. That actually happened with, how many of you have heard of Senator Marie Alvarado Gill just changed parties to Republican? So Senator Marie Alvarado Gill was a Democrat. It was 2 Democrats that advanced in that district, a solid Republican district. She's going to be up for re-election. Conveniently, she changed to being a Republican ahead of the election for a solidly Republican district. Now, we need to welcome all Republicans. We need to welcome everyone that's willing to wake up and have a change of mind. But we do find that a little bit suspicious. So we're watching her and making sure she votes the right way. But we encourage people coming to their senses. So at least that part's good. But so we're encouraging not splitting the vote. And one of the major ways we're doing all of that is with this voter guide. So the voter guide helps rally everyone around candidates and help not split the vote. The criteria that we have for this voter guide, let me explain how it came into being, is about 20 years ago, like many of you, Carl DeMaio, my boss man, many of you probably heard of him. You're probably on our email list. You probably get my emails. I'm sorry, not sorry, but it got you here. Carl, he got a lot of people asking him, what does this mean on the ballot? What is this ballot measure? It's confusing. Who are the conservative options for judges, city council, etc.? And so he started, sending out his recommendations, and more people wanted to know. And so this eventually then grew into a voter guide, which is the most used conservative voter guide in the state of California. We just mailed out 2.5 million copies of it throughout Southern California. So it is one of the most used voter guides. We use this to help rally the vote around a specific Republican candidate in every race, conservative candidate. We're open to backing Democrats if they side with us on issues, but we haven't met a Democrat like that. They're a unicorn. If you meet one, send them our way. But the issues that we look at when we're endorsing on this guide is, are these candidates in favor of ending the high crime crisis? Are they in favor of trying to address the homeless crisis? Are they in favor of no new taxes? If you're backing any tax hikes in 2024, you need to have your head examined, because we have the highest cost of living in the entire country. And frankly, there are politicians on both sides of the aisle backing tax increases on the ballot, and I'll explain what some of those are. It's insane. So we look at various of those issues, very common sense things. They tend to be conservatives that we back. So first, they need to be good on the issues. 2, they need to have a good campaign put together. They need to have money, backing, campaign infrastructure, etc. So we look at those criteria: good on the issue, have a good campaign. And if there are more than one candidate, more than one conservative candidate in that race that has those 2 things, then we just have to pick one. So if your favorite candidate is not necessarily chosen, it doesn't mean they're a bad candidate. They could be a great candidate, and we'll support them in a future election. It just means we have to rally around one so that we don't split the vote. So that's kind of the concept of the guide here. And I'm going to walk through the statewide measures in a minute, but this guide cannot happen without you. You are the grassroots army, and you are the most critical part of our plan. The Democrats will never be able to compete with their money and the media. They control all the liberal media. Probably saw the presidential debates. Totally fair, 100%, promise. So we'll never be able to compete with the media. We'll never be able to compete with their billions of dollars that they funnel in. But what we can compete with is the grassroots army. Because if you go and tell 5 to 10 of your friends about this, you inform them, you share the knowledge, you're viral in nature, and they can't compete with that. Because they can't tell the Democrats, their Democrat friends and voters, what's actually on the ballot and what it actually means. Because if they knew what it actually meant, they'd vote against them. Because it's pretty common sense, some of this stuff, once you actually hear what it actually means. And statewide propositions, the ballot titles and summaries, are written by the Attorney General in California. Any guesses who the first Attorney General of California was that wrote misleading ballot titles and summaries? Kamala Harris. Yes. And she did that with Prop 47. And Prop 47 is coming up on the ballot again. Many of you have probably heard of Prop 36, and I'll go over that in a minute. But Kamala Harris, when she wrote the ballot title and summary for Prop 47, she called it the Safe Communities and Schools Act. And it didn't do that. What Prop 47 actually did was it tied the hands of police officers and prosecutors. It made it much harder for them to enforce the law and crack down on criminals. And since Prop 47 passed, we've seen a massive spike in smash and grabs in retail businesses. Lots of places are going out of business because they can't afford to stay open anymore because of all the theft. So thank you, Kamala Harris. Let's hope she doesn't do that to our country. But that's the case. So they're misleading. They're misleading on purpose. They are to try and force you to vote for what the politician. And so it's very deceptive. So let's start with the statewide ballot measures here. I'll go down in order. You should all have a copy of the voter guide. If you don't, Aaron can help get you an extra one if you need one. Let's start on Prop 2. So Proposition 2. On the ballot, it says that Prop 2 is a statewide bond measure that helps fix school facilities. It also helps the children and the puppies and the kittens, and etc. Well, here's first and foremost what it means is a bond measure is essentially a tax increase. Anytime you see the word bond, it's basically a lie from politicians to try and cover up the fact that it's a tax increase. Because bonds are a government loan. They are the government getting a loan at the taxpayer's expense. They're charging the taxpayer credit card. Taxpayers have to pay back that loan with interest. So Prop 2 is a $10 billion bond. And with the interest that we're going to owe, it's actually going to cost taxpayers over $17 billion for its lifetime. And usually that money is recovered in the form of property taxes. So generally bonds are a property tax increase. That's the first part about this that's terrible, because it's a tax increase. The other thing is, it says it goes to fix the schools. Oh, the children. Oh, the sweet children. It doesn't go to schools. What it actually contains, and like most of these things, is provisions that allow the money to be diverted to any other project in the general fund that Gavin Newsom wants to fund. Because Gavin Newsom has a massive, massive budget deficit right now in the state of California, and he wants to fund all of his pet projects. What's the best way to do that? It's to hike taxes with misleading worded things on the ballot so he gets more money for to fill the back of his pet projects and cover the deficit. So that's what it'll really go to, is all his pet projects. It's not gonna, hardly any of it at all, if any, will go to fixing the schools. And we see evidence of this. How many of you remember the gas tax increase? Yeah. We tried to repeal that with Prop 6.
And registration.
Yes, we came pretty close, but unfortunately, we had the gas tax increase. Senator John Morlock's office, though, did a study in our gas taxes to try and find out exactly how much of our gas taxes go to funding road improvements like they claim. 80% of our gas taxes are going to salaries, overhead, bureaucracy, meetings, studies, etc. And only 20% of those funds ever comes close to touching the roads. But most of that money goes to mass transit system stuff, public transit, before it ever touches the roads. So ergo, you get you get pennies for the roads. That's why our roads still suck. So they do that with all of these. They divert it to other things. So that's another reason why it's bad. It won't fix the schools. Now here's the worst part of Prop 2, though. It contains something called a Project Labor Agreement, a PLA. And you'll probably hear that with a lot of measures. A lot of local measures use that as well, a PLA, Project Labor Agreement. What that means is that any contracts that get approved through Prop 2 must use union labor. It's a requirement. So first off, that writes out mom and pop businesses. So if a mom and pop business wants to come in and make a construction bid, and say, I'm going to come in at, $5 billion cheaper than that union company, and I'm going to save the taxpayers tons of money if you go with my bid. The state of California is going to go, oh no, we banned you from even bidding on this project. We're only going with the union labor, and yeah, it might cost taxpayers $5 billion more, but oh well, that sucks. So that's what they do. They require union bids, and it writes out the mom and pop places. So that won't save taxpayer money, and it also will hurt those mom and pop places. Worse, though, is the money for those union contractors, when they get that money, is the union workers owe union dues. So when the union workers get paid with those taxpayer dollars for these projects, their paychecks are garnished for union dues, and the union uses that money to donate to Democrats, Democrat campaigns, partisan campaigns, and politicians. So, easiest way to look at this is it's Democrat politicians putting things like Prop 2 on the ballot to fund unions who fund Democrats. It is Democrats funding unions funding Democrats. It is a cycle of corruption. It happens at the local level and at the state level. That's what Prop 2 does. Now, despite how terrible Prop 2 is, you will see, if you got the guide from the California Republican Party, they are recommending yes on Prop 2. No, I'm not kidding. Do you want to know why? It's because they got campaign contributions from the backers of Prop 2, and they sold you out.